So welcome everybody to AI Starts with the Right Data. Why keeping ServiceNow documents in SharePoint matters more than ever. So for most of everybody who's attending today's presentation, you are a ServiceNow platform owner, or you're a developer, or in some way you have an interest in your ServiceNow environment, and you are most likely struggling with content existing in two spots and are still seeking or looking for information to figure out where your content should live. And today's presentation, what we're going to do is we're going to focus really on the AI side of this equation and talk about the document management and AI integration into ServiceNow when it comes to document management. For those of you who are not familiar with DTech Apps, we are a certified ServiceNow partner, and we've been building apps for their platform for, wow, almost a decade now, it feels like. Built some of the first apps to be introduced to the ServiceNow store, and that would be Tasker. And upon the development of that app, it led to the creation of other solutions, Doc Integrator, and its two complementary solutions that are included in the Doc Integrator suite, the Doc Generator product and Doc Flow. And Doc Integrator is a key tool for those of you who are looking for an easy way to quickly get ServiceNow and SharePoint to operate together, as well as we have some other cool features in Doc Integrator that go beyond just the basic integration between the two platforms. So real quickly, so just want to go into the cost of the status quo. Like I said, most of you are here because the current way that you're operating with your ServiceNow and SharePoint environment is breaking. You're either using URL fields in ServiceNow workflows, and those fields frequently break as version control and other documents come or change. And especially if it's being moved into SharePoint and back and forth and other version changes, you're dealing with broken links, and that's not an efficient way of working. And it also creates another big issue, which is duplication. If you're paying for storage in ServiceNow, and even at that isn't as cost effective as SharePoint is, if you're holding copies of files that already exist, you're dealing with a multiple duplication risk, whether it's on the platform in ServiceNow, or even within your own SharePoint folders and environment if you're not maintaining your documents well. And then finally, obviously, it's those hidden costs. So it's not just the storage fees, but it's I like to call it the productivity tax of content switching and really lost productivity. Think about this concept of the swivel chair. Every time a user has to open a new tab to find a document, their workflow stalls, and with that it adds on extra delays. And the concept of workflow is supposed to help us be more efficient, as well as documenting steps. And a lot of times that efficiency is broken when you have people leave the platform. So our goal here is to try to keep everybody in the platform. So our key here is maintaining SharePoint as our system of record. You've already invested heavily in the Microsoft ecosystem, which is why most of you are here. You either, in some capacity or another, have SharePoint integrated throughout your entire enterprise. And SharePoint has that level of enterprise governance and content management and version control, audit trails, retention policies, everything that makes it the leading enterprise content management system out there. It even has the security protocols in there to handle PII and PHI content. So thinking about making sure that files are only accessible to those who have rights to those folders and to those documents. And that's a big thing. And when we go between systems, some of that stuff breaks. And most importantly, we're trying to figure out how we don't move data to fit the workflow, but what we're trying to do is really bring the workflow to fit the data. And so standardization of our platforms is our first step towards proper AI readiness. So we're talking about content. And when we talk about content, I'm sure for those of you who have been in the SharePoint world for a long time, we've talked a lot about metadata, and metadata matters. And especially when we talk about AI readiness, we're really talking again about metadata being important, because AI is only as effective as the context it has. Um, when we map SharePoint metadata directly into ServiceNow fields, if we do it through custom code and the extended framework of development through XCC, we end up spending a lot of time trying to manually create that. And so that in and of itself is both a cost prohibitive and a very complicated means of getting the two platforms to work together. And especially when we look at metadata in general, we don't just want to make sure that our AI, when it's looking at our content, it doesn't just see a file. It sees that it's a policy, it's a contract, it has a specific purpose, it has an expiration date, it has a security level. And especially when we enable global search to look across SharePoint, Teams, email, everything that is in that Microsoft ecosystem of storage that ultimately ties back into SharePoint and the OneDrive platforms, which were all sort of, it's a webinar in and of itself to go into exactly how they're all one and the same. But when we're doing this, we need to make sure that we're respecting privacy by design. And the biggest key here is as we've collected metadata, as we're bringing this information from SharePoint into ServiceNow, we also need to make sure that the workflows within ServiceNow are secure, and that metadata as well is stuff that other people can't access. So the biggest key is, how do we keep the AI from not sharing information that people shouldn't be seeing, that's captured in ServiceNow and exists also in SharePoint? And then, of course, how do we make sure it's all efficient? And our biggest objective here is really talking about leveraging AI that you already own. So many of you have Microsoft agreements, and with that, you're already paying for Microsoft Copilot in some form of fashion within that agreement, whether it's within Office 365 or in your Azure subscription. You have access to Microsoft's AI. And the reason a lot of us are looking specifically at Microsoft Copilot as our AI of record, and why we're also looking at SharePoint as our document system of record, is because we know that in Copilot, it's designed that our files and our information that we're storing in Azure isn't being shared with the rest of the world. It's not contributing to Copilot's knowledge base. Copilot has that security built into it. And so how we can leverage the tool that's already pre-built for that into our existing systems that are non-Microsoft, like ServiceNow, is paramount to our success as IT leaders, developers, and consultants. Now, not just keeping our data private, but also making sure that when it comes to Copilot and the way it operates, other AIs and other ways that you bring AI into different platforms, it will look to the platform to index some information. And with indexing, that means that you're going to be having the AI on a schedule look through all your content, build out a table of metadata that it references, and then points back to the file. And that's not something we want. We don't want duplicate information, or even at that, information existing where one, it has the risk of being accessed by others, and then two, the whole concept of indexing. So whether you run it hourly, nightly, whatever, there's something has to process, and that can create a system lag. The other issue too is that your index and your AI is it's only as good as the last time it indexed. So when that's an issue, you can have files get updated, new files created, new files attached into workflows. And if your indexing is only happening once a day or every couple hours, or even at that, if it's a high intensity department, You could have content, being cranked out in the hour at a regular basis on certain workflows, and indexing is just inefficient. So you need something that's already going back into the system of record where the document lives. And so with Copilot, we're looking at Copilot not just because it doesn't need to index within your ServiceNow environment to keep track of your SharePoint files, it's directly at SharePoint, and it's keeping track of those files itself in its own secure environment. So Doc Integrator is not just your key for document management in SharePoint and ServiceNow, bringing over everything that we talk about, what's great about SharePoint, and embedding that to make it look as if it's natively in ServiceNow. But we're also talking about bringing over that same Microsoft AI between the platforms, so that your document management is secure, and the AI that you're using within your workflows is also referencing documents that don't have their data in multiple places, and it's the most up to date. So with Doc Integrator, it is a commercial off-the-shelf COTS solution. There are ways that you can try to develop this integration in ServiceNow, but it's not very fast. It takes a lot of investment from a developer standpoint. And in all honesty, you'll never be able to create the same functionality and deep, rich integration between the two platforms like what we've done here with Doc Integrator as quickly as we can get it up and running, and as cost effective as the entire solution is. Compared to what you're paying in some cases for your various ServiceNow licenses, solutions like Doc Integrator and even our Tasker solution look more like rounding errors when it comes down to how much it costs compared to your total investment on these platforms. With that, I'm going to pass the presentation now over to my colleague Josh White, who will go through a demonstration.
Thank you, DC. Appreciate it. Let's actually take a look at some of what DC talked about in that overview here and dive into what Doc Integrator looks like on the actual platform within ServiceNow. So the first key part of Doc Integrator is that it's easily embedded into any ServiceNow application. So with just a few minutes, a user can configure and not code Doc Integrator to show up as a tab within any ServiceNow record, within any ServiceNow application. So here I'm logged in as an agent into the CSM workspace. So I'm helping out a customer on this case here. So this is just a standard workspace view with all the customer and case details to help me out. But as you know, and with a lot of other workflows, I need some documentation to help me actually resolve this case and to do my work. So if I'm not using Doc Integrator and I want to house these documents as ServiceNow attachments, I run into a few problems that DC mentioned, but I'll just briefly touch on. So things like search not being able to be done over other attachments, having to, there's no external search for needed files. Unless we take into account, XEC or WDF, but even with these files, it's not actionable. Two, if I need to edit this document, I'd have to download this attachment. I'd have to edit it from my desktop. I'd have to re-upload the new document and delete the old attachment. There's none of that versioning to make sure I know that I'm working on the most up-to-date document. And this also makes it very difficult to co-edit and co-author documents with someone else. So if I'm working on a case, if I'm working on documentation with another agent, and we're both downloading and working on our desktop, neither of us can see what the other is doing, and we're probably overlapping on work unnecessarily. So to get a look into what the alternative is, where my needs are met as an agent, I'll just go ahead and click on the SharePoint Documents tab from within this case here. So we've named it SharePoint Documents. This name can be configured to whatever your organization needs, but this is Doc Integrator here embedded within the workspace. And you can see we're still in this workspace. We've kept the UI simple and familiar. we've simply surfaced SharePoint documents important to the ServiceNow record in the UI without actually bringing those documents into SharePoint itself. And here we also pull in SharePoint metadata. So whether that's one of the out-of-the-box columns or custom columns for a specific use case, we can pull that metadata and organizations get to decide and configure what important columns they need for visibility. Or of course, they can just keep it out of the box with the columns that we see here. So let's actually take a look at one of these files. Say I need to co-edit this customer handling policy document here with another agent. So it's as simple as clicking on the name of the document here where we're brought to a preview view, but I'll go ahead and expand it out to the full edit view so we get all that full functionality here. So if you're familiar with SharePoint Online or Word Online, you have that full functionality here. So I can make edits, I can make comments if I want to add a comment for the other agent that's working on this. Any changes that I make, I can get that visibility to all in real time collaboration with my peers, and it just makes sure that we're always on the newest version and are not doubling up on work. And since we're talking about AI here and focusing on that AI aspect, Doc Integrator lets organizations leverage their existing AI licenses. For instance, many companies have these Copilot licenses as packaged with Microsoft Office or other Microsoft products, and you can use that Copilot functionality in this view. So we can expand the summary here, get the pre-built insights, discussions, or activity, or I can even expand this right pane here where I can ask Copilot specific questions, get a summarization of the document, and so on here. So that's just going to further save me time, get use out of the licenses that I own as well. And we don't have to change through tabs and switch out of different systems. With just a click, Doc Integrator allows users to get the best of both ServiceNow and SharePoint, and that maximizes both of their value here. We use ServiceNow for the great front end and the workflow, and then of course SharePoint for the robust document management, the security, and collaborative functionality. So if we go back to the workspace here, I'll close out on the documents that we have. Let's look at another use case that our customers see a lot of value in, and that's the digital signing of these documents. So many organizations pay for expensive enterprise signing solutions like Adobe Pro, DocuSign, but we've been able to help some get out of those hefty investments and simply utilize a free signing solution like Adobe Reader by leveraging Doc Integrator. So if I need to sign this customer invoice that we have here attached within SharePoint, I can do so simply by right-clicking and opening in Desktop. And so what that is doing is actually pulling up this document with my desktop app. We're not downloading anything, so Doc Integrator actually allows us to sign in place, keeping the document within SharePoint and adding that signature. And we work with a lot federal customers as well. So for them, we do allow for the use of PIV or CAC credentials when it comes to signing. So I'll make that signature here, simple as that, adding my digital signature. We'll wait for it to save back to SharePoint, and then we can close out there. And then we can see if we click on the link to that document, so that PDF in SharePoint, we can see it's the most current version. Here's that signature that I just made, and anyone working on this document can see that, of course, in real time. So next, I'm going to switch over to the more standard platform view of ServiceNow. So of course, there's a big push towards workspaces, but we see a lot of organizations still working in this backend platform view. But I just wanted to make the point that Doc Integrator is easily embedded across ServiceNow, no matter the type of view or the application in this case. So we're looking at SPM, but again, this could be any module. It could be ITSM, ITOM, legal service delivery, HRSD, even custom built applications. So Doc Integrator always just embeds as that tab within the record, and we see here, this is that project documents section. So just like before, I can scroll down. It's still the same UI, but we still get that full functionality of Doc Integrator here. And this is another way we can extend the reach of ServiceNow without needing to invest in other expensive, say, ServiceNow fulfiller licenses. So say I need to collaborate on a document for this project with someone who does not have a project fulfiller license. Instead of needing to give them that license, they can still access this record and they can read the information and use Doc Integrator to co-edit that document without needing editing or write permissions from within ServiceNow. Just a few other functionality that we have within the application here is we can, of course, upload documents directly to SharePoint from ServiceNow by using Doc Integrator. So instead of jumping tabs into SharePoint, signing in again, finding where I need to upload, I can stay in ServiceNow where I work and just click that upload button and directly in Doc Integrator. And Doc Integrator also has an advanced searching functionality. So if I click on the search icon here, I'm brought to Doc Integrator's federated search, and here we can quickly search the content of all files from within our SharePoint, and of course that the user has permissions for. We can also search other sources as well, as you can see here, such as Outlook messages or Teams messages, which again, we need permissions to as a user. And multi-source search in ServiceNow without Doc Integrator can be pretty frustrating to work with and set up. You need to index items, define search sources. It's not real time. You have to schedule these data crawls. So you're also limited by both storage and transaction costs. So Doc Integrator lets you jump these issues and, of course, keeps everything in SharePoint where it belongs. So I need to find a specific document, such as a product guide. I can search SharePoint and we quickly get all the relevant files. If I need this document for further work, I can copy or link this to the record back to the actual project that I was working on. And now the final thing that I wanted to show, we're going to hop to a different view here. So wanted to expand a bit more on the AI specifically that we talked about and DC talked about a bit in the overview. So we're going to take a look at how Doc Integrator allows organizations to be AI agnostic. So simply put, Doc Integrator lets you take whatever AI strategy you have in place or are working with and apply it to all the important documentation or artifacts that you have stored in SharePoint without needing to bring those documents into another system. So this is just another one. This is one of our apps called Tasker that we built for dynamic tasking on ServiceNow. And on the right here, you'll probably recognize is Doc Integrator embedded into this task with all the relevant documents. This task is a briefing for contracts. So I need to summarize these documents to create my briefing. Now, because Doc Integrator is leveraging SharePoint and is AI agnostics, organizations can prompt their AI model of choice for things like summarizations and next steps, all without leaving ServiceNow and with the documents not leaving SharePoint. So I can do a single summary here simply by right-clicking the document and selecting Summarize. So we'll do that, for example, here. So we're actually going out and prompting the AI model, which is looking through the document and is creating the summary here for us, which we can download and possibly reattach back to this task if needed. But I can also do a executive summary by selecting multiple documents, and then I can look at my actions and click this Get Executive Summary option. Now, for the sake of time, just because it takes a little bit for the AI model to generate the response, I'll just hop to this tab where earlier I created this exact summary with these documents. So with this ever-changing and growing technology landscape, it can feel scary to lock into one AI strategy, but tools like Doc Integrator can adapt to their organization, giving you the peace of mind that you won't be left behind.
With that, I'll open up for the last minute or so, I'll open it up for Q&A. Perfect. With that, the first question, it says we have very strict permissions in SharePoint for many of our HR and legal documents. When we integrate these with ServiceNow through Doc Integrator, will we have to rebuild any of those security rules in ServiceNow? Worried about sharing data that shouldn't be seen. And I think I've touched on the data part. I know, Josh, if you want to if you wouldn't mind.
You wouldn't need to rebuild anything within ServiceNow. So we actually just take the permissions, the security that you have within SharePoint, and we leverage that within the Doc Integrator application. So there's no need to build out anything new within ServiceNow.
Then our next question, is Doc Integrator different from the SharePoint connector? I'm assuming SharePoint connector, we're talking about the ServiceNow's XCC connectors that are in its that you can connect APIs to in their workflow data fabric format. I'm assuming that's what's meant, or is it are we talking about the AI integration from the current Doc Integrator product? Maybe what I'll do is I'll just touch on all of those, and hopefully we can get that nailed right. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so it is. So we're talking about the workflow data fabric. Um, so Josh, I don't know how much of that you want to cover and how much you want me to cover.
Yeah, I mean, I can go ahead and start.
Okay, perfect.
A lot of the times the connector, what is kind of built out, what we're talking about here for SharePoint, is used for administrative things. So things like changing users or groups or things of that nature. It can pull documents from SharePoint, but it would be held within ServiceNow afterwards, and you would have to do that at a scheduled data crawl, so it's not real time. And you'd also have to pull in all the metadata that is related to those documents and those SharePoint sites as well. So often organizations that want to integrate with SharePoint, they just see, oh, there's a SharePoint connector with ServiceNow, there's a SharePoint spoke or what have you. That's all we need, right? But it's basically only used for those administrative tasks. When it comes to actually pulling in documents and viewing them in real time, editing them, it falls quite short in that regard.
With that, I'd like to thank my colleague, Josh White, for his great presentation. And I'd like to thank all of you for taking time out of your day to learn a little more about AI, SharePoint, and integrating ServiceNow with your Microsoft assets. Thanks again.